private profit incentives in private corporations. But now there is another way. Decentralized tokenized networks can change the game. Mass adoption of decentralized applications is now possible thanks to the ownership and incentive structures of tokenized networks. So tokens can change two things. First, they eliminate this distinction between network owners and network participants. And second, they can create incentive mechanisms that can supercharge growth. So in well-designed tokenized networks, a nonprofit foundation actually manages the open source software, wholly eliminating shareholder claims on cash flows. Instead, value is held inside the network itself and represented by token ownership. All the participants use, hold, and accrue tokens. In short, the users are the owners. In this structure, incentives are aligned and positive sum. This results in better outcomes and alternatives for everybody. Because there's no division between the owners and the users, the incentives never diverge. Additionally, tokenized networks give users power in ways that was never before possible under corporate structures. How do Facebook and Google and Amazon users dissent? They really don't. In a tokenized network, however, users can dissent from leadership decisions by forking the code and creating a new version of the blockchain. This is what happened in the wake of the DAO hack as the Ethereum community disagreed on policy, resulting in Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. So, how might user owners influence the growth of a network effect business? The short answer is, in ways we've never seen before. It's what Nick Simon calls the double network effect. Ultimately, the network users have a vested interest in helping their network grow if growth will improve their user experience and or increase the value of their token holdings. Most important, users are given clear reasons why they should invest their time, and in some cases capital, into growing the network. The double network effect is made possible because of the twin benefits of eliminating the extraction imperative and incentivizing users economically. What's really exciting is the implications that has for the future. So I believe in the next decade, at least a few revolutionary tokenized systems will overtake today's most powerful corporations. I started this talk by posing a question. How long will it take before we can have fluent conversations about blockchain with everyone we encounter on the street, the way we can about the internet or smartphones? While the question might be philosophically interesting, it's really practically inconsequential. Philosophy doesn't accelerate decentralization, and our parents don't use Facebook because of the underlying technology. They use it so that they can view pictures of us and maybe to play Candy Crush. If there's only one thing that you take away from this talk, I hope it's this: design and invest to optimize for mass adoption. To date, the early users of decentralized blockchain applications have really been those with a pre-existing interest in the space. Right now, we're seeing dApps and utility tokens offering a decentralized version of Airbnb or Facebook or Amazon or Netflix. What's on offer so far, though, is usually just structural philosophy, the lack of a centralized intermediary controlling their data or privacy or profits. And while this value proposition and offering may be resonant to crypto enthusiasts, like those of you in the audience, my parents are unlikely to ever care, nor is likely my mailman or my neighbor. It's not going to get us to mass adoption. For the average consumer, a centralized versus a decentralized philosophy only really matters insofar as it impacts price, convenience, or speed. Uber didn't decimate the taxi industry by promoting the value of a peer-to-peer sharing network. It instead radically improved the pricing experience of getting from point A to point B in a private car. So new protocols, products, and platforms can become mainstream when the average user understands the benefits to them without being required to understand the enabling technology. Ultimately, everyday consumers don't need to know the difference between Ethereum and EOS to know that they want more value for their time and their money. To achieve mass consumer adoption, decentralized applications must be an improvement on the status quo and not require consumers to understand crypto, blockchain, or even token economics. So the question to me becomes, which centralized businesses will be the first to fall? And this is something that I've spent a lot of time investigating. Today, I'm going to discuss 6 risk factors that makes companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google susceptible to tokenized and decentralized applications. By unpacking these risk factors, we can take into account which dApps are most likely to succeed in the short term and improve the threat that they pose to today's centralized monopolies in the long term. Let's begin by looking at the economic factors. Starting with risk factor 1, who pays and how much? Broadly speaking, network effect businesses are organized in one of 2 ways. In the first way, users pay directly through commissions and fees on purchases. In the second way, end users end up paying indirectly through the monetization of their attention via the exposure to advertising. The more that a consumer spends within a monopolistic network, the more economic rent is extracted from them by the company in the form of commissions and fees. So business models in which users pay directly out of pocket are much more painful on the user than business models in which they pay indirectly via their attention and their data, as those are largely invisible to the end user, and the end user often doesn't care. Parents with kids, for example, when they do their monthly accounting at the end of the month, are not counting the number of ads their kids have been exposed to as a reasonable change factor that they're looking to account for. Consequently, the potential for decentralized businesses to disrupt a fee-extracting company is much higher. Amazon, therefore, faces a lot more risk to decentralization than companies like Facebook and Google based on this risk factor. Risk factor number 2 is early network value. The more that a decentralized network can provide value to its users before it reaches scale, the more disruptible it can be to any incumbent. When a user switches to a new burgeoning network, there are inevitably sacrifices in terms of the value that the network can deliver. It's a classic bootstrap problem. In some cases, however, there are also benefits to a smaller scale of networks, which tends to come in the form of less competition for attention. A reduction in competition may benefit advertisers and third-party sellers as they face less competition for the attention and can more easily differentiate themselves relative to their peers. Facebook is not at risk of early network value risk, for example, since the network is about connecting you with your people in your social community and you want as many people on there as possible. Google and Amazon, on the other hand, are at a higher risk of being susceptible to early decentralization networks as users compete for attention from the broader public. Risk factor number 3 is simplicity to copy. So technological complexity creates defensibility. Companies with really expensive and hard to create technology make it harder for decentralized competitors to offer a comparable that has a better user experience over the status quo. Even when early adopters are highly incentivized in the form of tokens, most dApps will still need to reach a minimum threshold of user experience parity to really engender consumer switching. Facebook and Google, in this case, are less at risk than Amazon because in the case of e-commerce, the core functions of discovering, purchasing, returning, and reviewing items on a marketplace are not particularly complex technological tasks compared to the tasks of rebuilding a Google or a Facebook to technological parity. Risk factor number 4 is the possibility of multiple winners. So the more winner-take-all a network is, the fewer versions of a network that the average person is participating in. For instance, in the case of social networks like Facebook, there is really not a true alternative. People don't generally participate in 2 versions of the same kind of network. There's no other Facebook. They're really just different types of social networks like LinkedIn's professional type. Similarly, in the case of Google Search, users tend to use a single search engine. Two-sided marketplace networks tend to be a little less winner-take-all. People are used to shopping in many different online stores that suit different purposes and needs. So Amazon customers will still shop on other online marketplaces. Winner-take-most networks are easier to disrupt than winner-take-all. When consumers are still used to engaging in multiple similar functioning networks simultaneously, it lowers the perceived barrier for them to switch to try out a decentralized alternative. In other words, trying something new doesn't signify giving up the old. So the easier it is to participate in multiple networks at once, the greater the risk of disruption to the centralized corporation. As such, Facebook and Google's core products are relatively low risk, whereas Amazon is at a higher risk as consumers are still shopping on eBay, Etsy, and etc. Risk factor number 5, third parties who encourage consumer switching. So many network businesses are made up of owners and users, but sometimes there's a third category of participants that interact with the end users in some way. For the advertising businesses like Facebook and Google, the third parties are the advertisers themselves, and their incentives are tied to the extraction imperative. The more attention and better data means cheaper and more effective ads. Advertisers want the user platforms they work with to extract as much attention and data as possible, and thus have no incentive to encourage users to switch. Third-party sellers on marketplaces, on the other hand, have incentives that are at odds with the extraction imperative. Sellers are incentivized to minimize commissions, fees, and restrictive policies that are at odds with their bottom line. So while Facebook and Google are low risk on this factor, Amazon faces higher risk because not only are sellers frustrated and fed up, many are actively engaged in other ecosystems and are looking for alternatives. Finally, risk factor number 6 is the expected loss from censorship. So the more likely a network is to censor its users, the more damaging and costly the censorship is to those users, and the more susceptible the centralized company is to a decentralized alternative that can offer censorship resistance. Censorship can be extremely costly, particularly in cases where users that are restricted or banned have invested a lot into building a platform presence, whether those be followers on a social network or buyers on a marketplace. The larger that expected loss from censorship is, the greater the risk to the centralized platform. While Google has a low risk of censorship, Facebook and Amazon have a high risk of censorship. For businesses and influencers, Facebook represents a key audience. And while social media bannings tend to capture news attention, Amazon bannings cut third-party sellers off from their customers altogether. The fact is that in today's economy, a select few number of unbelievably large corporations have become more powerful than governments. Armed with the extraction imperative, they use that power to suppress wages, extract rents, and even control public policy. The unique characteristics of blockchain allow for entirely new ways of organizing human behavior. This enables incredible things like decentralized delivery networks, prediction markets, commission-free marketplaces, instantaneous cross-border payments, and the list goes on and on. Tokenization stands to fight centralized monopolistic corporate power better than any antitrust initiatives of the Justice Department in the United States. The cost savings to users can be more than financial. They can also come in the form of increased privacy, wealth creation, and ownership of their data, in addition to more favorable network policies. Blockchain is experiencing big hype and bigger expectations. To deliver, we have to remain laser focused on consumer usability and experience parity. Until the value propositions of decentralized apps are significantly better than centralized ones beyond we're decentralized and on blockchain, we run the risk of building obscure, clunky, and confusing applications for niche audiences. We have a responsibility to design products for the mainstream. So I'm here as the CEO of Public Market, a protocol for e-commerce marketplaces without middlemen. We believe that Public Market can be the product that creates mainstream adoption of crypto for 3 reasons. The first is that Public Market disrupts an industry that billions of people are already engaged in, e-commerce or online spending. This month, Public Market is launching its beta product with millions of unique inventory items already available for purchase. Users like you can buy your books or your towels at public.market without needing to understand the benefits of blockchain. The second is that Public Market is a tokenized marketplace. This means that you and other users are incentivized to do what you already do, shop online. And not only do you earn token rewards for every time you shop, but you can earn even more when you refer others that do the same. The third is that Public Market offers a best-in-class product and experience that is cheaper and better than the alternatives. If you'd like to get on the wait list for early beta access, please go to public.market to sign up. And in conclusion, the decentralized future really is out at our doorstep, so let's get out there and serve billions and billions. Thank you.